The challenge we have is we're worried about council collaborating very closely with this particular government at this time, given their transport preferences and aversion to evidence-based decisions is becoming fairly notorious, shall we say, of late. I just want to point out as well that a lot of good public input has been captured over the course of the Let's Get Wellington Moving plan. I think that's written in the meeting notes that while they did a few things, they did gather a lot of public sentiment data and priorities. So we hope that this next generation of plan creation builds on that input closely. People of Wellington, I get the feeling, are getting quite tired of repeating their desires to be able to access their city via healthy, affordable and equitable mobility means. People of Wellington want more options that don't rely on someone driving a car or a truck. So I guess be careful what you wish for. Producing a plan that is closely aligned to meeting the funding opportunities dangled from central government at this time risks diminishing local voices and local community wishes. We're seeing that happen in other parts of the country as we speak. The transport project objectives invariably prioritise movement over space, and Wellington is predominantly about creating an empowering place. Place for people, place for business, place for community, place for recreation, place for connection, place for nature, place for people. So Cycle Wellington supports more placemaking efforts like the Golden Mile and encourages this new transport plan to not lose sight of the important point, this important component of transport, which is place. Walking, cycling and good public transport, like rail, we can wish, have a positive effect on place, even though people are moving. They at least do not detract from the quality of place if done well. Transport modes, which we won't mention, have a very negative impact on people and place. So we encourage the council to advocate strongly for quality of place to meet well-being, health, climate and other livability goals. We really admire the superblocks example from Barcelona, if that is a memory for some of you. If not, please check that out. So New Zealand's track record has not been great for transport over the past decades. It's more of a road record. We simply cannot keep thinking that roads everywhere will miraculously start delivering what our city and its people need. We remain sceptical about the intentions to build more general traffic tunnels. We note that the addition of extra road space will only result in generating more traffic, moving fewer people with more vehicles. New Zealand has pressing needs other than throwing billions down some literal holes in the ground. The tunnel example provides a clear example of a likely clash of priorities that a development of a plan at this time in collaboration with this government will suffer from. Coming up with some projects in order to look like you're doing something while fitting the government priorities of the day on astronomically expensive RONs and car tunnels is unlikely to deliver many outcomes consistent with a sustainable transport hierarchy, or climate goals for that matter. We urge Council to stay focused on developing a great city where Wellingtonians can thrive before signing up to 30 years of whatever an Auckland-based Minister for Driving thinks is good for us. Political priorities change. As we've seen, there's every reason to expect those priorities will return to putting people and place and planet ahead of failed car fantasies. Be careful what you wish for. I'll leave it there. Any questions?
Any questions? Councillor Rogers. I was just interested in your discussion around how many times people have already submitted on our transport plans, how many times we've run business cases for them, how many plans we have for many different modes. I was just wondering, I guess from your perspective, is it more useful that we start implementing those or kind of synthesize those into one plan?
We know what we need to do, and the council is also suffering from a lack of, so I do agree with this in terms of central planning. There's not a really great central plan of transport for New Zealand cities. It's not like we're incredibly unique in this regard. So I just wonder how, broad-based, you doing a plan and then another city doing a plan and all that stuff is really beneficial. I'm more reflect on the fact that you don't have all the tools that you need to work with, which is what this plan is kind of pointing to. I just wish there were better standards that didn't result in massive car dependency for all of our cities.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Of course, we know that you're very knowledgeable about cycling in Wellington. And what comments would you make? There was a dotted plan of what we're building and some dotted aspirational links for the central city. I'm not sure we'll be building everything there, but what would be your priority for the central city?
Place, and there's a huge opportunity to really revitalise the central city for people and place over excessive amounts of movement. And the forms of movement that do exist as part of place, walking, cycling and good public transport can enhance that. So it's just getting more cars out of the central city, I think, is what we need. It's what we're seeing in other great cities around the world.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not seeing any further questions, so I just want to thank you both for your time and for bringing your views to Council. I now welcome Bill Frith from the Living Streets Aotearoa to also speak on the Wellington Transport Plan. You two have 10 minutes, which also includes questions, and please make yourself comfortable. Thank you.
Oh, I'll say that again. Morena, everybody. I'm Bill Frith. I'm from the local branch of Living Streets Aotearoa. Living Streets Aotearoa is the national organisation for pedestrians. We want to see more people walking more often, so if you consider a pedestrian a vehicle, we want more of a certain type of vehicle going further. We believe that footpaths are for feet, and users of low-speed mobility devices like wheelchairs. We support safe, separated pedestrian infrastructure, safer speeds, better connections between walking and public transport. We want to see e-scooters and bikes have their own safe, separated routes, and we do not support their use on footpaths or on shared paths. Now, getting onto the plan, at a high level, the draft plan appears to be very positive for pedestrians, with many statements supportive of walking as an active transport mode. However, when you dig deeper into the detail of what is actually planned, it appears that the words are not being well followed up with actions. In particular, the walking policy, it's 16 years old, and updates urgently needed to reflect today's conditions. Once updated to the present, there should be a regular updating in response to changes in government policy statements, so that it is a practical document reflecting what the Council actually intends to do. Living Streets is willing to assist with the updating process. I looked at the walking policy last night, and it's basically responding to the situation of government as it was a long time ago. Now, improving the walking network. Walking is the highest priority in the Council's sustainable transport hierarchy. Most residents perceive that the city streets are safe for walking. However, that's perceived safety rather than actual safety and does not change Wellington's position as a city where death and serious injury for walking normalised by population is well above the national average and above peer group cities in New Zealand. Now, walking is by its nature one of the safer modes of transport, but relative to everybody else in New Zealand, we're not doing well in that respect. Now, based on that information, we don't believe that the bullet point of the summary statement on page 33, which says greater concerns for safety of people on bikes compared to people walking in Wellington City. We don't believe that warrants a place in the summary statement. In its present form, the statement could be used erroneously to justify downplaying the importance of pedestrian safety measures. That's because the general public don't really have an appreciation of the difference between perceived safety and real safety, and we firmly believe that the safety of both pedestrians and cyclists should be high priorities. Now, from what's gone before, we'd expect that improving the network so that walking could flourish would be of a similar priority to the considerable work carried out to improve the cycling network, which we applaud. However, this does not appear to be so. The draft plan states walking is one of the most common modes of transport in Wellington City. However, walking facilities in Wellington City suffer from various deficiencies, including missing footpaths on suburban streets, the lack of basic pedestrian facilities such as curb ramps and safe crossing points near many public transport stops, and safety and hazard issues with some access ways. It then goes on to say, the Council is undertaking an ongoing stream of minor projects to close gaps in the footpath network, often in response to service requests for new facilities on residential streets. Highest priority is being given to developing new footpaths in locations where there are a reasonable number of people using the footpaths, a history of road crashes involving pedestrians, and a high number of service requests. Now, the above minor projects are definitely necessary and they definitely have our support, but we also notice that they are reactive rather than proactive. Unlike the cycling network program, the development of new and improved facilities is based on existing demand rather than the increased future demand, which is both needed to meet the city's emission reduction targets and which at present is suppressed by lack of better facilities and connections. It also appears that unlike for cycling, the Council has no plans to identify an optimal walking network and then proactively work towards achieving it. This begs the question as to what extent the walking work program of the Council can contribute to the long-term strategic priority to transform our transport system to move more people with fewer vehicles. And our recommendation is that the importance of enhancing pedestrian safety and improving pedestrian networks be prominently stated in the Wellington City Transport Plan and, very importantly, reflected in the actions taken under that plan. Thank you, and we've got some time for questions, which is great.
Great, thank you, Bill. Any questions? Councillor Free.
Yeah, Bill, I'm particularly interested in what you've got to say because I notice you've got a MSc in Transport Engineering. Is that correct? Yeah, obviously it is correct. I just wanted to ask for your opinion about some of the really obvious gaps in Wellington's pedestrian network. Can you highlight a few things that where you really think we should put some attention?
Right. Well, I'm not a pedestrian expert. I'm a keen pedestrian, and I've joined Living Street's quite recently. I can't tell you where the gaps in the network are. I can tell you where there's some, and this is mentioned in the plan, where Karori Tunnel, for instance, is a very dark, dingy place which would not be very, attractive to pedestrians, and that's on a very important pedestrian route into the city from Karori, which I've traversed many times. But it's not just the gaps, it's the quality of the infrastructure in between, and we've got to make sure that people of all ages, including, older people, can go out and go from one place to another walking without coming across what used to be called manholes without covers on, gaps in the actual pavement of the footpath and things like that. We really need a network that pedestrians can feel confident that they can get from A to B safely, pretty much whatever their age is.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
We have time for one more question. Councillor Randall.
Yes. Last week, a couple of weeks ago, the council decided to go ahead with the Golden Mile project, and under its current design, where there's a cycleway going through the middle of the pedestrian areas in Courtney Place and on Lambton Quay. Have you any comment about, the cycleways, plans of cycleways going through pedestrianised areas, and do you support them?
Yeah, basically we are against shared pathways, and you only need to listen to the talk about what's happened on the Oriental Parade to understand what we're concerned about. I think it's the design thing. You actually need to design those places so that there's a clear demarcation between where the pedestrian should go and where the cyclist should go.
Thank you, Bill. I really appreciate your time. I'm not seeing any further questions, so hope you have a great day.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I now invite Pearson Palmer from VUSA to also talk about the Wellington Transport Plan. Feel free to sit wherever you like, and you have 10 minutes, including Q&A. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I'm basically going to be echoing a lot of the same points, maybe with a little bit less congeniality, but I'm a little bit exasperated, actually very exasperated that we have to come up here again, but I am defiant. I refuse to watch our generation inherit a city gridlocked by regressive decisions. We will not quietly watch as Wellington is transformed into a sprawling, polluted shadow of its potential at the behest of Simeon Brown of all people. I am not just here to scold immature, car-brained ideas by the most questionable of planners. I am here to remind you of a bright spot in your council's history. In the early 2010s, when the Basin Reserve flyover was proposed, this council chose to stand firmly against an ill-conceived car-centric project that would have irreversibly damaged the urban fabric. You rejected the narrative that cars should dominate our landscape. You prioritized community, culture, and livability over the interests of a noisy minority obsessed with convenience at any cost. Where is that council now? Why is the relevant IHP led by Greg Pollock, who openly supports a long tunnel? It's the idea is a laughingstock in the transport community. Let us not forget why the basin fight matters. The flyover wasn't just a bad idea in one area. It symbolized a catastrophic failure of imagination in urban planning, the same failure we see today in proposals to expand car infrastructure. Globally, car-centric projects have left cities littered with broken promises and broken neighborhoods. Sydney, Los Angeles, Auckland, I was just in the super city the other day, and let me tell you, more roads does not a good transport system make. Okay. If you want a masterclass in urban dysfunction and environmental degradation, look no further. Urban highway projects promise prosperity, but they deliver gridlock, inequality, and decay. The numbers don't lie. Cars, as a mode of transport, cost more for their municipality and the user, and they destroy the very environment they seek to better access. Now, against all logic, Wellington's compact, walkable form, a rare jewel in this country, is being forced into the same doomed paradigm, potentially. We are not Los Angeles, a city that at one time had the space to afford the ills and bills that come with cars. And I say at one time because even the city of highways has pivoted hard towards public transport after realizing what a colossal mistake they made. Building more roads will not fix congestion, it will worsen it. There are no special circumstances that exempt Wellington from this, no matter how much bunk evidence some of the councillors would like to cite and try and wriggle out of reality. Low cost benefit projects and the feelings of car-brained snowflakes are prioritized over the evidence. Meanwhile, vital investments into public transport and active travel are cut back or delayed, if not outright canceled. We feel betrayed by some on this council's staggering lack of sensible priorities. We often hear, in defense of the status quo, that Wellington is not like other cities. You are correct. Wellington has an extremely unique spatial profile. We must play to our strengths. It could not be more clear that our strengths are a large, walkable urban core. It is in need of, and conducive to, much more dense housing. Our metro region spatial layout is perfectly aligned with mass transit corridors. That's why so many Wellingtonians don't drive regularly. What we are not is a city that can afford another 2,000 cars being funneled into a space that simply cannot fit them. And let's talk about Tiaro. Already assaulted by the perpetual roar of State Highway 1 slicing through its core, the vibrant community now faces further neglect. Tiaro, with its rich history and cultural pulse, is being slowly suffocated by pollution and noise. Instead of revitalizing its streets, you are proposing slamming even more cars through its heart. For a council that loves to tout sustainability and equity credentials, you seem very comfortable contemplating social and environmental vandalism. And it's not just the direction of the report wants to take us in. The specific projects, the Mount Victoria Tunnel, the Second Terrace Tunnel, described as necessary for improving resiliency and reducing congestion, are laughably unaffordable and will only lead to marginal gain. Report after report shows that urban motorways lead to marginal gains and long-term pain. Your best case scenario is moving the choke point a few meters down the road. How are some of you seriously peddling the fantasy that more road capacity will somehow reduce traffic? It's 2024, and we're still debating induced demand like it's a fringe theory. Build it, and the cars will come. Build it, and you will have more emissions, more gridlock, and a less livable Wellington. Likewise, build transport options with positive, low-carbon externalities, and we will induce demand there. This is a choice. A fundamental decision needs to be made about what kind of city you want to be in. One based on the lack of understanding of urban design and transport, supported by councillors who shamelessly lie about bike lanes, or an evidence-based model that has led to great outcomes overseas. This report touts resilience. A bigger highway isn't resilience. It is capitulation to fossil fuel dependency. Car chargers ain't gonna cut it. True resilience is found in investing in public and active transport, in designing cities where people take priority over vehicles. Yet again, here we are, as the same swindling auto salesmen lead us down the garden path and into ruin. The government is chomping at the bit to plow a highway of national significance straight through Wellington. And y'all are just, just a little bit, maybe we should do something about it. And at the expense of heaps of amazing programs like bike lanes, or heaven forbid, making it safer for children to walk to school. They're all thrown in the waste bin or delayed. Why even bother with the sustainable transport hierarchy you're so proudly plastered all over Te Atakura? How can the council seriously commit to a carbon zero future while actively undermining its very principles? You cannot have it both ways. You cannot champion carbon neutrality out of one side of your mouth while muttering half-baked justifications for carbon spewing infrastructure out of the other. We were told that this shift in funding priorities reflects a pragmatic response to economic conditions. Pragmatic for who? Certainly not the residents of Wellington, the students, families, the workers, the majority of us who use public transport. We will be the ones who are poisoned by emissions in a city choked by traffic. Or is it just pragmatic for the construction lobby, who is more than happy to take on billions in government funding for projects that don't make any economic sense? Maybe for the car dealers whose presence actively ruins Kent and Cambridge Terrace, or the vested interests who see climate policy as a nuisance rather than a necessity. Maybe for Councillor Calvert, whose rent-seeking voter base seems...
Pearson, I'm just going to ask you to be respectful, please, and it's not appropriate to...
Completely inappropriate, and there have been a lot of comments against councillors that would not normally have been permitted in any other speaker. Thank you.
So I'll ask that you not name councillors, please, but continue.
Also accuse councillors of other generally.
Maybe for certain people's rent-seeking voter base, who care less about the health of the city they sometimes bother to drive through and more about blowing hundreds of millions of dollars in limited government funding so they can spend 30 fewer seconds passing by on their way to another expensive holiday. Let's not forget the government's own rhetoric. They claim to be solving the housing crisis, yet their obsession with car-first infrastructure undermines the goal of affordable urban living forwarded by the NPSUD, a policy that they support. High-density urban living is less expensive, less carbon-intensive, and heavily sought after. Heck, it's the main selling point of our beautiful city. You cannot build compact, affordable housing in a city strangled by highways. Car-centric policies perpetuate sprawl, isolate communities, and drive us deeper into fossil fuel dependency. Pollution and cars kill people every day, both directly and indirectly. This council knows better. You've proven it before. Let's see some of that courage now. The Wellington City Transport Plan must reflect the values of this city: sustainability, equity, and resilience. This is not the time to be timid. We need bold leadership, not cowardly compliance with a regressive agenda. We need a plan that prioritizes public and active transport unequivocally. This means continuing the great progress made towards reimagining our streets as places for people, not thoroughfares for cars. It means expanding bike lanes, improving bus frequency and reliability, and pedestrianizing the Golden Mile, Dixon, and Upper Cuba. It means interrogating the notion that car drivers are the only people who spend money at businesses and see it for what it is: people afraid of change who are prioritizing their own convenience and backfilling reasoning later. It means rejecting the absurd idea that cars deserve equal priority in an urban environment with limited space. And it means reminding the government of what Wellington has voted for time and time again and saying a very firm yeah, nah to Simeon Brown. To borrow from your own vision statement, transform our transport system to move more people with fewer vehicles. Many councillors around this table voted to get rid of the ambitious transport plan under Let's Get Wellington Moving. Now they're decrying the lack of one as unacceptable, as if their blood-curdling shrieks of Wellington's imminent demise due to bike lanes and light rail didn't help it get cancelled in the first place. And now you are trying to stuff more roads down the throat of a city that can neither afford it nor wants it. I speak for the tens of thousands of students and urbanists when I say this. Several of you need to consider a different career choice. Your behavior to both colleagues and also your contempt for reality and the needs of the city is unforgivable. You have proven time and time again that you're not fit for the job. On the other hand, Wellington deserves continued bold leadership. It deserves an adult, world-leading transport plan in the spirit of what the mayor and half of the council have already achieved, one that matches the ambition of its people and the urgency of our times. We've seen the council take a stand before, and we're asking you to do it again. The choices you make will echo for decades. You will lose many of us if you choose to regress. Young families, students won't see a future here if the council's only plan is to look to the past. Will you be the council that gave into inertia or the one that dared to lead? Thank you for letting me speak. I will not be taking any questions. Gotta go get a haircut.
There we go. Thank you for your feisty
diatribe, I would call
Pearson. I now take us to...
I think he supported the non-cyclists more than ever.
Let's not, I've lost my train of thought because of said passion. So I now take us to general business. 2.1 Wellington City Transport Plan. So from a procedural, because I know there's still ongoing discussions about this particular paper. Sorry, Councillor Free, can we? Thank you. The officer's going to introduce the report and take questions if there are any with the current version. Then he's going to invite the independent panel to speak to the report and take further questions. And then we're going to adjourn for a bit, because I understand there's still an amended substantive and other discussions. So we'll take a morning tea at that point. When we reconvene, we'll get back into the paper. So, Tamsin and Vita, please join us to introduce the report with Liam.
Good morning, councillors. The purpose of this report today is formally to respond to that notice of motion passed on the 6th of June. That was on the back of the notice of motion for the Golden Mile, and there was an amendment made to it, and proposed to you the preparation of a Wellington City Transport Plan. The council over the last two trienniums have made some pretty big decisions. You started, for those who were in the triennium previous, looking at the city from a very high level when you adopted the spatial plan. which effectively looked at trying to connect all of the various aspects of city making into one network. You then dropped down a bit. You did another big piece of work, which of course was the adoption of the district plan, and that plan effectively provided the city with some certainty about how and where to develop, with a very strong emphasis on housing. And you made those decisions with vigour and with much community engagement, lots and lots of interest. Just listening to the public submissions this morning, obviously transport is obviously also of high interest to the community, so it is no surprise to us as officers that this particular piece of work will attract quite a bit of attention. We are faced with some pretty important questions for the city. We have a very clear objective that we want to move more people with less vehicles. We have a new state highway upgrade announced, the details of which are still coming through in terms of the actual routes and type of construction that will take place. And of course, we have to do that, as noted this morning, by balancing the need to make sure our places, our unique places, are enhanced and made distinctive to Wellington and to what people appreciate when they visit and benefit from Wellington. So the other key point worth noting, of course, in the decision again in the last couple of triniums was the adoption of Te Atakura, our first to zero strategy, and the importance of keeping a close eye on the city's carbon emissions and what it's going to take to move the dial in that regard. We all know that transport is the major lever we can pull in terms of decarbonising our city. Again, that's why this is an important piece of work to do. The point of a transport plan, I think, in my reflection, is the point of the bike network plan. I mean, you can see what we're proposing is to integrate our bus priority plan, our walking policies, our bike network plan into one wholly integrated plan. And I've seen the benefit of an integrated plan through the bike network rollout. You see we have done quite a bit of change to the city in the last 3 years. And that was always anchored on this idea that we had a network we were working to, a network of arterial, whether you agreed with the arterial network or not. That was the one we were working towards. And we've been rolling that ever since. And it's helped us anchor the policy position of council back when we've been talking together with the community on those changes to roads. So I just wanted to put some context in place there for council. I wanted to also acknowledge the fact that this perhaps hasn't delivered what the notice of motion was asking for. When we went away and sat down and tried to do this work, we as planners and the city design team in particular were very clear that actually to understand a network, you have to look at the whole, not just part of it. So a central city vision perhaps needed to be contextualised in the context of the whole city, and also with our Greater Wellington Regional Council partners who run the public transport network, and of course also with Waka Kotahi, who have a stake in the city as well through the state highway network. So I'll leave it there. I just wanted to quickly introduce Tamsin. I think you've met her before. She's a program director for a number of projects, Harbour Quays, Bus Priority, and Eastern Connections Bus Priority, and she's also looking after the Wellington City Transport Plan program project. And then, of course, we've got Vida and Sean here, along with Moana, to help, who've also participated in preparing this report. As noted by the chair, we have the part of the panel here. We have Greg Pollock and Alan Kerr here in person, also Tim Webmeyer online from Australia to answer any questions after we've answered questions from council. So I'll leave that to you now for question time.
Fabulous. So any questions for our officers? I'll start with Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, thanks, Liam. I just want to re-clarify what budget have we set aside in the long-term plan for the next 3 years for our transport work?
The current budget for this project is $300,000, and that's sitting in the city design unit. There are other transport budgets related to Brad Singh's area and T&I, but for the purpose of preparing a plan for consultation, that's 300,000.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I guess I want to comment on the walking policy, and I was very surprised that the plan didn't highlight that the walking policy is, 16 years old, as one of our submitters noted. Why was there not more focus given to the need to update the walking policy?
Through you, Madam Chair, look, I don't think there was any intention that there was a lack of focus on that. I think I've been listening to Living Streets Aotearoa for quite some years now as they've presented their concerns about the city's walkability. So it's always intended that this plan will include walking at its core. We know that just by journey to work data and the compact nature of the city, it's a very important part of how people move around the city, get to work, go home and enjoy the place. So it's not lost from us at all.
Other question I have is around the draft bus priority plan, which we never got to a final point, and I understand there's work being done on it. When is that coming to us to have a look at? When are we going to have a workshop on that or some other kind of heads up? I'm a bit concerned it's being managed by Greater Wellington and we may not have a chance to actually have some feedback and input into it.
But look, Alex and Tim are here. I failed to mention our colleagues from Greater Wellington, the Regional Council, are here to help answer questions as well. But the intention is that this plan would integrate some of that work. But from a...
What do you mean integrate?
Integrate the bus priority action plan as part of understanding the public transport network.
Yeah, but that's not what I'm asking, with all due respect.
So I'll hand it back to Tim and to speak with the detail of it.
Yeah, I'm actually asking how we have some input into the bus priority action plan.
Kia ora koutou, councillors. Through you, the chair. We are currently socialising the first draft of the Bus Priority Plan, Action Plan 2.0, with officers at the moment, and we'd love to present that to your council early in the new year if that's possible.
Be very good. We have quite an interest, as you can understand. Thank you.
Councillor Matthews.
Liam, I'm interested in how, I'm assuming we have coordination between our various transport projects without having had a plan like this. And I'm just wondering if you could comment how that happens and whether a plan like this is necessary in order to coordinate.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. So to date, we've been very project focused. The integration of work relies on the way we team up to deliver projects. So for all intents and purposes, the business as usual with or without the plan would be the same. And we generally try to integrate placemaking with transport investments. My early point around the bike network plan, it is sometimes also helpful though to have a plan to anchor decision points from, and it helps in some respects also to communicate outcomes to the various communities that we work with. But in terms of priority, this was something set by Council in June as part of the LTP amendment. It wasn't planned to occur straight away for council officers, but we do have budget for it. We just started it slightly earlier. We've got quite a strong focus on water at the moment, as you all know, and a lot of our planning work was sitting in those areas, for example, the western catchments and northern catchments of Wellington in terms of the ability to cope with growth. But again, it was planned to do this plan at some point the next year. It was just that June conversation around the Golden Mile that Council had that the NOM came out of.
Was there a specific remit for this report to kind of comment or, review the Golden Mile decision? No, but the report has to consider some of those key spines that go through the city. So some of the key decisions we're making and have made, Harbour Quays we're about to make, I suspect, and Golden Mile, of course, we have made, have to be considered as part of the making of the plan. Yes, but factored into, not kind of reviewed separately, if you see what I mean. Yeah, that's correct, yeah. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, just channeling on from Councillor Matthews. So what you're saying is you were going to do this work but later. So my question to you is it really necessary to do this plan now?
Well, you're asking a planner to do
A plan.
To do a
plan,
of course. It's always important to do plans. No, it's a timing issue. I mean, you think enterprise-wide, our priority is a new water entity emerging for the region. You know, we have a number of metropolitan councils who are going to be part of that, I assume, or not. And we have to get our growth infrastructure in place. So, as I mentioned before, certainly the end of this year and the first half of next year was preparing for the new entity to understand what growth infrastructure we needed, and then we were going to move to the transport plan later on.
Okay, so then just on that, what would the 300k have been otherwise spent on if you hadn't moved it? Well, I'm wondering where it came from to do this work.
It's all part of our operational expenditure, so I've just been consolidating budgets and moving things forward and pushing things out, just reprioritising as we can do.
Okay.
And do when you set those objectives for us.
Okay, so then just one more question. Because we've had to reset the long-term plan, my understanding was that we've created our transport priorities through so Harbour Quays, Golden Mile. Yeah, so I'm just trying to work out how this plan fits into that, and if it's absolutely necessary right now when do we have the money to do anything else the plan recommends?
Okay, there's a couple of questions in there. Look, the first point I'd make is this was passed prior to the LTP amendment and the airport share sale decision. So, and again, one of the reasons why it is late, we were supposed to report back in September. It is now December, but a lot of the organisation's resources went into the preparing of that LTP amendment documentation, and that continues, of course. The second part of your question, I think, look, it is very much an opportunity for us to continue working with the organisation for some of the urban spaces around the city. If we weren't going to do this work, some of the laneways and public space improvements would probably be a focus.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, my first was just kind of a point of clarity earlier. Deputy Mayor Foon asked about the 3-year forecast, and I noticed in the paper it says this financial year this allocated budget is 300,000, so I was just wondering over that 3-year period whether there was any future budgeting for it.
So the budget for the transport plan was put into year 1 of the LTP to enable us to do that planning to allocate the rest of the city streets budget, which was now taken out through the LTP amendment. So it's possible to either move it to another project or to make a saving of it.
And then my other one was just around, Liam, you mentioned that it was being allocated within existing budgets, and that meant sort of rephasing or pushing some other things out. What sort of things would we be delaying by reprioritising this work?
Well, it goes into that whole... So the transport plan was to look at the next phase of projects within that city streets budget so that we could prioritise at a network level and look at it in a systems way, because we know that each of the streets, especially in the central city, don't have space to do everything in every single street. So it was to make sure that the next tranche of projects could be prioritised, to make sure the network worked as a whole, and to deliver on some of the goals and the vision that you've got for the city. So without that, it can be pushed out without major consequence, because there's no budget to do the projects which were going to be done post that.
Yeah, thank you, Vita. And to go back to Deputy Mayor's point, what's effectively happened through the LTP amendment is a very compressed period of work for Vita and her team to decide what to finish and what to start, whilst deferring all of the other transport projects. And that deferral exercise beyond the 10 years was going to provide that space for the transport plan to sort of recalibrate where the priorities might sit into the future.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
let me get this right, Liam. So what you're basically saying is the council doesn't have integrated transport plan, but you are intending to have one.
Yes.
So in that case, with absence of this integrated transport plan, how would you prioritize projects that you have compared to some others? Maybe you need to do one that is not approved, and you do something else later on, you realize, oh, you shouldn't have done it. How, if you don't have integrated one, how are you going to do those things?
Very good. So, Councillor, what you're asking is effectively a form of planning architecture. And so the choice you're making today is, do you consider project by project how those projects meet your outcomes that you have decided through the LTP and items such as the walking policy and the spatial plan? Or do you create a single touch point for your transport activities to which you work? Either way, transport planning takes place, and the question for you is, as governors, can you most effectively govern the city using a transport plan, or can you rely on a consistency of planning approach?
Yeah, and good answer, Sean, thank you. Yeah, so the consistency of planning approach, that's right. I mean, from a basic level, I think I'll draw on the bike network plan again. You know, we understood that a connected arterial network is the first tier objective of that strategy, and that's what we've effectively nearly completed. So you work towards a methodology that looks at connecting a network, not doing things in isolation in the absence of an integrated plan.
So where do you think those two things might gonna merge into an area where you just can, oh, we have, this is where we're heading, having that integrated plan, but we're still going ahead with those projects? Do you expect at some stage where, if you do, when that would be?
Well, like most policies or plans, it's a reference point for you as governors to make decisions around, and you, depending on your priorities of the day, can reprioritise those projects.
Yes, and just as that, we talked about the architecture of how decisions get made, there's also the question of, do you implement that architecture now or later? Given you have a great number of decisions to be made through the LTP amendment process, we need some degree of certainty to plan around. And so the question is now, do you use this piece of work? Do you commission this piece of work now, or do you commission it later, or do you commission it at all?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One more question. So I think that is where we need your advice, though, isn't it? And that is why we need to be relying on your advice, saying that, yep, this is what you need to prioritize. We want you to make decisions. I'm getting there, Madam Chair. So we need you to make those decisions based on this. Is that what you're planning now? And if we haven't planned so far, is that because of the governance decision, or why we didn't get there previously?
Well, that's what the objective for a plan like this would be: have an integrated picture of all the modes that use all of our transport network. What we've done to date is had individual plans, and again, I mentioned with the bus priority action plan, which of course was only in draft, or the bike network plan. Those frameworks were still in place for us to make decisions behind. This is just going to provide a more comprehensive understanding of future decisions that future councils will need to make.
Councillor Randall.
Yeah, so it's going to be a while before the plan comes together. The report mentions there's sort of phase one projects are going to proceed ahead. What projects are in, well, let's say, this current year that are going to proceed in this financial year?
Thank you, Councillor. Phase one was around phase one of developing the plan. So phase one is essentially the first cast across what's the existing information, which is in your appendices, around what's the current state. So phase two is how we then take that forward into developing the plan. So that the phasing is about the plan, not about building networks.
So I think we're talking cross purposes. I'm referring more to the consultant's report, which said that the council had developed its transport planning into phase 1 and then phase 2, and that phase 1 that the program, what basically says the progress made by the office on phase 1, it was more about projects that are done this year. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean?
Okay, I think they're the ones I mentioned earlier. So Harbour Quays and Eastern Connections are the focus for Tamsin and her team, and the Greater Wellington Regional Council. They're the projects that are in flight, and Harbour Quays ahead of the game. That's the first cab off the rank, because that relieves that pressure. Bad turn of phrase. That relieves that pressure on the Golden Mile, of course, and the Greater Wellington team can talk to that in detail.
Councillor Free.
Are we allowed to ask questions of the Greater Wellington officers that are here? Okay, so firstly, I do thank you for a bus service that in my neck of the woods anyway is working really well, and I think you've seen that with your patronage numbers. But I just want to ask, not to put you on the spot, but when the decision is made to do something like purchase the bendy buses, which obviously has some implications for us in managing the turning areas and other, length of bus stops and what have you, how much information do you get about the flow-on implications for Wellington City in terms of our expense and time frames before you make a decision like that?
Thank you, and through the chair. Obviously, the bendy buses or the articulated vehicles is something that's an active project in flight, and we have ongoing discussions with your officers at the moment around how we best design the key corridors at the moment and what the impacts might be on those corridors. At this stage, we've identified there will be some roading corridor modifications, which we have previously identified through consultant studies. And we're more than happy to share them with this council if that's what's required. And we would like to discuss the potential route design as well at some point with this council. So we are happy to bring this through. Potentially we could also include it in the bus priority action plan update. So we're more than happy to bring both at the same time.
I guess I'm concerned that, there is a financial cost to a decision that's been made, and that is, I understand, already made, that 5 buses are coming. How much information do we get about, how much influence can we have over this decision, being as it does have financial implications for us?
I think through you, the chair, we are working very closely with your officers, and we can quantify the financial impacts of those decisions. From our perspective, the articulated vehicles are one of the projects that we just needed to do to release the capacity on the Route 2, particularly out of Karori. So we saw this as something we needed to do because there was very few alternatives to release that capacity. And we understand that may come at a cost, but we are happy to engage with officers to identify any additional costs.
And is the cost, will there be any sort of cost sharing?
I'll leave that to Tim.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah, Councillor, the original route for the Eastern Corridor was obviously one of the projects coming out of Let's Get Wellington Moving. That is now what has been reduced significantly to a series of improvements to enable the use of articulated buses on the Courtenay Place to Miramar Seatoon. So yes, that is a 50-50 cost share with Greater Wellington.
But the problem is Karori. Does that need...
Final question,
yeah,
please,
anyway,
Councillor.
sorry. I'm relieved to hear that there will be some more opportunities for us to get informed. Thank you.
No worries.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple more questions and then I might take a bit of a cup of tea break. Councillor Matthews.
Sorry, just seeking some clarity around the resourcing for this work. I think this is probably you, Liam. So if we don't further resource this work, does that mean the work that you referred to for water and planning water infrastructure and to support housing growth in the northern and western suburbs could be done sooner?
Yes, it does, particularly for the northern area, because the current commissioned work we have with Wellington Water relates to Karori. It's the western part of the city. You'll be familiar with the wastewater constraints there. So we also have similar constraints in the greenfield areas in the north, and that work wasn't going to happen as fast. So we'd probably look to bring that work forward, given Wellington Water's capacity to do so. But that would be the outcome.
Councillor Rogers.
I guess my question relates to the broader implications of this, and it kind of goes to Sean's point about a governance position about deciding what the way is that we plan. And I guess my reflection is that we do things like the spatial plan, and we have our transport partners like Greater Wellington, and they also have local government ways of consulting and developing plans. And my question really is around what consideration you had to how effectively this fits in with the organisation's current way of planning, and whether more systemic changes would be required in order to support this way of reporting to council than we currently use within our enterprise.
Look, me personally, my position would always be an integrated multimodal plan for the city is a good thing to do. As I already mentioned, that doesn't mean we don't act in an integrated way when we deliver projects, but my discipline as a planner would say it's always good to have a plan, and it's always good that the plan's integrated. I think when you look how complex this region is with so many municipalities and a state roading authority that runs roads through various cities in the metropolitan sector, you do need to gather that complexity in some way. Today, we currently deal with it as teams, teaming up, connections, making phone calls, having workshops. But again, the preference from a purely planning point of view would be to have some sort of reference point at some point for this quite complex region because of the nature of the geography and the nature of the assets we have. Wellington, though, to be fair, has been doing quite well already. We have a good relationship with the Greater Wellington Regional Council. We have a hub and spoke model where everything kind of leads to the CBD and the airport and port. It is kind of a cul-de-sac, so that makes things a little bit easy to plan for. You have only a limited number of corridors to think about. But as I said, my preference would be to do something like this at some point of time due to the complexity of the systems we work with.
Yeah, I guess my question is less so about how beneficial it is in the planning space and more so in terms of actually managing the resource that we have within the enterprise, whether it would be a significant deviation from the way that we do manage that resource and the way that teams work together, or whether it just...
No, not a significant deviation as such. As I think I mentioned this earlier, the normal BAU wouldn't change.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to take a 15-minute morning tea break, and then we'll come back and we can ask some more questions. But can I recommend that those who have a strong view either way on this report have those discussions now before we move forward, because I understand there's an amendment and so forth. So please use this 15 minutes well, so we're not here for a very long time. Thank you. got into a particular position so we can come back to the table. So there were some discussions over the break, and in reading the room, we've made changes to the paper and now have an amended substantive. And before it's moved, we'll just ask a few more questions of officers. And I'm thinking, based on the discussion that has been had, there's probably not too many more questions left, but I just wanted to hand over to you, Liam, because you're across this, and to give your understanding, etc., of what's now being proposed.
I'm definitely across this. I've been briefed. I don't have a copy in front of me at the moment, so yeah. Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Randall.
Thanks, Tony. Okay, so officers are comfortable with these recommendations, councillors. Two's quite self-explanatory, of course. It just we're looking at 3, the opportunity for us to continue to work with Greater Wellington Regional Council on walking, public transport and cycling will of course continue. The 4, note the workshops will be held with councils, again very easy to manage. That will lead up to the next LTP regarding walking, public transport and cycling plans. And 5, recommendation that officers instead prioritise planning for water infrastructure and housing growth in the western and northern suburbs in the current financial year. So I'm guessing my early advice to you about where we were with the new entity and the planning for water infrastructure is the reason why 5 exists. And again, that's an opportunity for us to accelerate that northern area I mentioned before and do that analysis. So I can take questions on any of those amended substantives.
Yes, so just to be clear, the substantive has been changed to not adopt this plan that we were going to do today, but still work on other elements like congestion charging and modelling around the implementation of city streets that have already been identified and funded in the LTP. Note that officers will update and progress current plans on walking, public transport and cycling in collaboration with Greater Wellington, and that workshops will be held from early next year to identify the priorities around walking, public transport and cycling lanes. And so forth. But anyway, let's take questions on the updated substantive. I'm going to take a list. I think I saw Councillor Abdurrahman first.
So if we vote for this, Liam, does that mean we will not have integrated transport plan and we making a decision to do a congestion charging work starting next year?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Free.
Oh, this is very, very quick. Look, and it's probably obvious, but the next LTP process means the one we're currently in. And yeah,
LTP amendment, sorry
yeah, because it just, I was assuming it meant sort of like fairly soon, but it could be interpreted differently.
Councillor Randall.
Well,
sorry,
just through you, Madam Chair, that's fine if that point of clarification is agreed. I thought that implied that was the LTP after the amendment. Okay.
So just to finish that last question, you're still okay with doing it more quickly? Liam?
One moment, okay. I think my initial thought when that was drafted prior to Councillor Free's point around the amendment, the current LTP amendment, was that it wouldn't apply to that. We already have set key projects in that LTP amendment process that have been accounted for and planned in terms of cost and timing. So I think there would be concerns with our ability to get a consultation document out in March and cram in that reprioritisation of that work. So I had understood that was going to be for the next LTP, not the LTP amendment.
I've got a couple of concerns about that. One, we've just had some commitment to meet with Greater Wellington to talk about the bus priority action plan. That will still be able to happen, presumably. Don't want to wait.
Yes.
Okay. And the next question would be that we have been asking for some time for some more clarity about our cycleway planning. So far I feel as if I haven't got clarity about how we're spending the money, even in this amendment process.
Okay. So it's all right, Vita. I think I'm aware that you have that view, Councillor Free, and we are providing you with some advice in that regard. There is a lot of documentation that went into the Q&A process for the LTP amendment work, and Vita has done an extensive amount of work to show in table form how we've reprioritised our cycleways budget in tranches. So happy again to resend that through to you and sit down and talk you through what those projects are.
Sorry, can people put their hands up again if they had a... yep. I'll go back to Councillor Randall.
Okay, thank you. In terms of the original notice of motion, we were really seeking an initial view of all the plans in the CBD together, along with commentary or feedback on the likely overall traffic impact on traffic congestion and the overall impact of the projects on parking. Under this amended substantive, when would we get that information?
Well, we'd probably have to be a bit more specific about what it is you want brought back for the next LTP process, but it wouldn't be until we are out for consultation post-March and have that work behind us with public submissions ensuing for us to come back and start talking about the future. So it wouldn't be until mid-year, I would have thought, comfortably.
Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. Sorry I wasn't here this morning. So, my concern is around walking. You will be able to make some really good progress on that with this amendment, given it's been identified in the papers as needing a bit of work.
I think, as you say, point 4, Councillor, I understand you weren't here for public submissions, but there was earlier comments about walking from offices and the importance of it in the plan. Point 4 covers an opportunity for us to present in the next LTP process workshops that will look at this very old policy and what we can do to update it. There were a number of points made by public submissions this morning around how old it was and that it was perhaps geared towards another time, and then it needs modernisation. So that would be achieved with point 4.
And we will do things for walking, not just do planning. As well, just like little things.
I'm not that familiar on the walking budget,
curb cuts
but Vita knows some of the finances around walking investments.
Yeah, so in the LTP amendment process, the footpath minor works program was reinstated, so that will be some of that money there. And then in the central city, we have got the Dixon Cuba Street as well, and with the Harbour Quays and Cross City Bike Connection, we'll have to be looking at those pedestrian crossings and things as well.
Cool. I did ask a question in the Q&A about the light rail. So the work, again, as part of this amendment, will progress the route protection.
So, Councillor, the previous resolution of the Environment and Infrastructure Committee, which I think was the 6th of June, referred that into the transport planning process. That will have to come out of an integrated transport plan if the substantive succeeds, and I'll have to progress that separately through a standalone paper.
So, sorry, just one more question for now. So, if this is rejected, are we still going to be able to do the planning?
Yes, you can still do the planning. It just simply won't be progressed through this particular instrument.
Right. I've got one more question, or shall I go back on the list?
One more, and then we'll ask the,
and then that will be it. Look, my thing is about our possibly not great performance in cutting emissions just yet. I know we'll get some wins later on. Are you confident that all this work will get us to that point where we're meeting the goals that we've set ourselves?
Am I confident? Through Madam Chair, look, I'm always a glass half full sort of character, so I'm confident we're going to give it a very good push. The lack of the Wellington City Transport Plan won't stop the ability for us to pull the biggest lever we have, which is our transport network. If we encourage residents to take alternative options, we invest in walking, cycling and public transport, then we will be doing our best efforts in that target.
To reiterate the answer given earlier around your choosing between what architecture as governors you want to make decisions, what is not at issue are the overall outcomes you have already voted for through the community outcomes of the LTP or instruments such as Te Atakura. What we're talking about is purely how are those going to be delivered.
So even though the amended substantive is to not progress with this plan, I do understand, Councillor Randall, you might have questions of the consultants while they're here. So I will allow that, and Greg and Co, if you just want to use the podium if you're asked a question, that would be really great. Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Hopefully other councillors can also ask questions.
Oh, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah.
I don't mind being exclusive,
yeah,
but
cool.
I'm just being generous as well. And your report, thanks for your report and the work you've done and outlined in Appendix 3. I note that it was in the report says it was the intention of the notice of motion and the supporting work was to give councillors confidence the Golden Mile project will be delivered within scope and within an agreed integrated transport plan. But you also note that that the officers to date haven't been able to complete the work or provide the work to you for you to review around the phase 1, initial set of projects that are going forward. Can you just confirm that and maybe comment about what you did get?
Through you, Chair. When you look at the changes that are occurring in the transport environment from a policy and planning point of view, you've moved from an integrated long-term program, which was Let's Get Wellington Moving, which was driving all of the planning decisions for Central Wellington. That was, highly resourced and highly funded, as I think has been well publicised. And you're trying to change the direction because there have been things that are no longer funded or no longer in the plan. It's a difficult thing to turn that ship around. And so I think what has been done well is there's now subject to your decision making today, there's now a clear view as to what the evidence base that's emerged from Let's Get Wellington Moving is, and whether you agree with what Let's Get Wellington Moving was proposing or not. It gathered a range of excellent evidence that can be used to support decision making in the future, and it would be unwise not to use that body of evidence for the future. I think when we sat with officers to try and understand the work that was needed to turn the ship, there's a lot more required to be able to get that integrated transport plan in place. So there was substantial effort. Understanding how to respond to the notice of motion, for example, and how to reposition this integrated transport plan. But there is just simply so much information, so much data, and a need to refocus in a slightly different direction that it's taken a bit longer. But we're confident now that the brief that's been put forward is the right thing to do. It's well scoped and it will allow you to make decisions for the future, like, for example, which corridors to focus on for bus priority. Where should congestion charging be applied and why? And how does the network fit together in order to make decisions about where walking and cycling and public transport and parking and so on might go? So that is, in our view, the gap that you have in your policy framework. You can obviously choose to fill that gap with an integrated transport plan, or you can do it, in other ways. I'll only answer your question for now, but that's what we got.
No, that's cool. I note in your report it also says that if the City Council proceeds with the full Golden Mile project, your view is the impacts and consequences for the wider city network are not fully understood across all the transport modes. Do you think there's a significant risk with proceeding without getting those that understanding, to the wider transport network?
So the short answer is yes. I mean, every project has risk. Is it significant? I don't think we know enough to know that. But what we're trying to point out there is that when the Golden Mile that you're about to deliver was designed, it was designed in the context of the Let's Get Wellington Moving plan. Key elements of that plan have changed. And what isn't known at this point is what's the function of the Golden Mile in that new plan. And so, as we know, when you're delivering large infrastructure, it's important that you plan really well, because if you don't, then when you get into the delivery phase, you can start to make major and costly mistakes. We're not suggesting that's the case. We're simply saying, just before you proceed, check that the benefits that you want Golden Mile to deliver can be delivered in the context of the network that you are now delivering. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah. And one last question. You do quite rightly note that the council, that Let's Get Wellington Moving was a well-resourced program with teams of consultants, and we sort of inherited it without the funding. And that there are real challenges with building capacity in the transport planning space to actually lead the city's transport plan. Do you think that it is a real priority to fill in that gap in terms of the in-house transport expertise?
The expertise is there. It's a question of where you point it and what you ask it to do. So in other words, how you prioritise. You've been through a period of time when you've had some other priorities. So our view was to Liam and his team, we think this is an area where you ought to build capacity. So in other words, add to what you've got. And I'd stand by that view, I think. And in particular, I think that this is a core competence for a council to have that transport planning expertise in-house, as opposed to outsourcing it to teams of consultants, as was the case with Let's Get Wellington Moving.
One more question, because it's your birthday.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Last question is, we've had submitters to us today that have railed about our pro-roading plan, about how alternative modes and buses are not properly supported. Having reviewed the plan that's been put forward and worked closely with officers in their approach to developing Wellington Transport Plan, do you think those accusations that it's a more roads plan, or is it, what was your comment about the balance being in terms of supporting sustainability?
You go first. Alan will comment too. I think the broad comment is that I think everybody comes at transport from a slightly different perspective. And what we need is, I think, a collaborative conversation about how do you balance investment. At sometimes buckets, one particular mode will be up and another one down. And that's why, in my view, it's really important you have an integrated plan, because decisions will come and go. But if you have a clear plan as to where you're headed in each corridor, how that network comes together, you can make different decisions along the way to prioritise differently. But as long as those things fit together, you're not going to waste money doing something that in a few years' time doesn't fit into a network. So I'll hand over to Alan to...
Yeah, I'll just to add to that, one of the things I would observe is that through Let's Get Wellington Moving, we did develop a whole load of evidence and a whole load of tools for analysing transport network performance. And I would just encourage you to think about how we use them going forward. What the plan was seeking to do was to be genuinely multimodal and thinking about which modes were on which corridors. And one of the things that we did find through the Let's Get Welly Moving work was that there were some corridors that it just wasn't physically possible to fit all of the modes down that we wanted to. And so using the tools helps us to get an understanding as to what needs to change. So an example of that might be, let's say in the context of the Golden Mile, I would encourage modelling to be undertaken to understand what the traffic effects would be of say, removing traffic from that corridor. I think it is absolutely a valid decision to take traffic away, but what the modelling will do is it'll help you understand the level of demand suppression that needs to be achieved to make that work, and then it can be planned with eyes wide open. And as an industry, we have the ability to understand what those implications are, what those trade-offs are, and then make an informed decision so that when we go out, we can actually communicate that.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, you did mention a body of knowledge gathered from Let's Get Welly Moving. How do we best access this body of knowledge? Because I think their website's now not there.
Yeah, and herein lies a bit of a challenge, I think. There was a huge amount of data that was assembled and developed during that process, and it is still all available. So I think all three of the partners took the data away, but by virtue of the fact that there is so much, it's taken quite a long time to navigate through that. And so I don't envy the officers who have been doing that, but they've done a sterling job of working through that and have got a really good understanding now about what is available, but it has taken some time and is one of the reasons why some of the comments that we've made are in there, just to reflect the fact that it is an enormous ship that we're trying to turn around and get value from. Does the public still have access to it? Some of it? I don't believe so. I don't know. I mean, I think if you use one of these, historic website trackers, you might be able to go back and find it. I don't know.
All right. Okay. It'd be nice to think that for the money that was spent, that it wouldn't all be lost. Just the plans for the second spine. I listened to what you said about, now we haven't got that overarching planning through Let's Get Welly Moving. And I guess my question is, when we make the changes to the Golden Mile, is it going to be necessary to follow up quite quickly with the second spine? How critical is it going to be? And do you have any evidence-based information about that?
Through you, Chair, the Golden Mile, no matter what you do to it, is capacity constrained. So if you think about it as a spectrum from, you might say we want it to be 100% for pedestrians through to 100% for public transport. Somewhere in the middle of that's the answer, and you've landed somewhere, and where you've landed has consequences for its capacity. As I say, even if you'd said we want to make it 100% about public transport, at some point the network, at some point in the next few years, the network that all funnels through the Golden Mile, as you know, would reach capacity. So at some stage you need to do something other than Golden Mile to provide the capacity. Wellington is a bus city, as we know, and the service is at world-class levels in terms of reliability and punctuality. My view is the next focus for the bus network needs to be journey time improvement, as in speed of journey and frequency. And if you put those two things next to reliability and punctuality, we're going to have a network which I believe will grow at much faster rates in the future. And the Harbour Quays project is one of a number of options in terms of how you might build that capacity. It's currently the preferred option. I think work has started on it or is about to start on it. And so the next stage is looking at how you design that to get the best capacity as part of a wider bus network that's legible for the people who need to use it. So that's the next phase of work. So whatever happens, additional capacity will be needed.
Is it still the view, though, that when we do the
Final
Golden
question,
Mile,
Councillor.
Yeah. Is it still the view that when we do the Golden Mile, the capacity won't be any worse than it is now? Because
no, sorry, I meant Tim Boughton.
or better.
Tim Wedmire, you're online. Can we get you to answer that one? Is our bus expert from Australia is on the team. Screens.
Kia ora, everyone. I would also just acknowledge, obviously, Tim Shackleton and Alex if they're still in the room. But the sort of short answer there was in terms of the bus growth, was it, in terms of future use of alternate corridors? Is that correct?
No, I was actually asking about the Golden Mile, which we have voted to go ahead with.
Sure.
It won't make the bus service any worse. It should make it better. I'm just asking if that can be confirmed, because I'm picking up some reservations.
I suppose I can only point to the business case that was developed for the Golden Mile, and that was a strong part of its benefit streams was in terms of bus journey time improvements and reliability improvements. In terms of capacity, my understanding is there's certainly no worsening, that the ability to speed up buses through there will preserve capacity and make sure that the bus volumes that are proceeding through there will proceed through in a more efficient way.
Yeah, no, that's good. Thank you.
I'm going to take just like a couple more final questions so we can just move on, given we're not adopting the plan. Any final questions, Councillor Randall? And then how about you, Councillor Pennant?
Just quickly, I'm feeling a bit sceptical because I've been working in transport for a long time. We've had zillions of plans.
No, question.
So is this plan, do you think, going to deliver this time?
No, because we're not adopting it.
Well, I wanted to know their view. And I also, just the other question was, we need to slam into our emission cuts from transport. Is this plan also going to deliver, do you think? Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure if it's a plan or about to be not a plan, but my view to you would be that in order to be confident of your ability to deliver emissions cuts, mode shift to public transport, improvements to walking and cycling, you need some form of plan that ties that together. That's my view.
Thank you, Greg. And my apologies, I didn't get your name. Alan? Yeah. Thank you, Alan. Really appreciate both your time. Okay, so we have Councillor Matthews. No? Deputy Mayor Foon, who's going to move the paper. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Matthews, would you like to speak?
Yeah, kia ora tātou. I would like to thank officers and the team for pulling this plan together, and also councillors for your collaboration on helping carve out a way forward. I think, apart from this landing at a tricky time of the year, and also post our LTP amendments, through that process, we've actually set our priorities for transport for the next 3 years. And so because we have a minimum now of funding, there is, to me, it's logical sense that we're not going out to the public consulting when we don't have a backup of funding to be able to put into place the what comes back from that plan. And I think council often gets talked about that we engage, we create plans, and then if we don't have a budget aside, there's not really much point. We also have priorities in water, which mean priorities in housing, and yesterday we set our plan to go forward with that. And so I think just by helping redirect that funding back to those priorities, there is a benefit there. And I really appreciate that we've actually done so much work, and it was overwhelming, the plans that we do have. But I think we can see that by working together, as officers said, there will be continuity in the way that we are doing the work. We'll continue with congestion charging, Councillor Opanovich, which is great. Thank you for your advocacy on that. And also, Councillor Brown, we have in the amendment workshops coming up to help us continue to reset priorities. So with that, I think that this is an appropriate way forward, and I do ask for your support. And we have made it clear that our priorities lie in low carbon transport modes, and that is what we are focusing on through our LTP and through what we're going to focus on through this plan. Thank you, and I ask for your support.
Councillor Matthews.
I reserve my right.
Fab. Any debate? No? Well, it wouldn't be a council meeting otherwise. Councillor Pennant.
So look, did second the norm, but really I think we'll probably agree on transport when we are swimming through Lambton Quay, because the sea has risen so much, because the city loves to have fights over transport, actually, and I blame myself for being a part of that process too. We have, it's been 25 years, that's probably longer than some of you have been alive, since the campaign to stop the inner city bypass started. And, you know, to be honest, since then, apart from some cycle lanes, we hadn't made that much progress, because we've just had these competing different views of transport, which just can't be reconciled. So I actually want to thank Councillor Matthews for a conversation I had with you yesterday. Actually, you're right. A plan is probably not necessary, because we just can't get agreement on it. And so doing is actually better. There's only 6 modes of transport that we have to consider in the land area, so it's not that complicated. You know, we need to do a bus network, and we need to do a cycle network, and we need to do some pedestrian improvements. We need to get light rail done. This is all obviously from my perspective. So doing is the thing that we have to do. We do, however, have a very good plan, and that is something that the Regional Land Transport Committee agreed to, which was our low emission transport plan. Unfortunately has no statutory function, but actually gives us the pathway by which we will cut our emissions. And it will not be easy. A lot of things have to change. It's not just about mode, it's about the way we completely organise our lives, our workplaces, so that we can choose sustainable transport modes. I mean, it's going to be a big change, but I do want to assure you, those who are working through that, it's not that bad. I have done it for a long time, and it's you just do things a little bit differently, and I'm confident that we can do it. But we don't have much time. Remember, we were going to cut our emissions. We're going to slash them by 2030. We're up to 2025. So we need to get a move on. But I'm happy with the answers from the officers that we'll do the work that we need to do in terms of walking, light rail, cycling. We'll try to keep making some progress with. And obviously the right kind of housing, so that people can live within local communities and have excellent transport to get into the central city. Kia ora.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. I move this report as a response from officers to my notice of motion, which is called the notice of motion, Golden Mile notice of motion, but it was actually about us getting a wider view of all of the things that were happening in the centre of our city, our CBD, our core transport corridors. It was a result of the briefing where the Golden Mile project was not part of any integrated planning. And so I really think that we needed to get a picture from officers about what was going to happen to our traffic, our parking, our cycleways, how the bus routes, how it's all going to fit together, because these things are literally happening on streets that are side by side each other. Having an integrated transport plan is, I fully support, because we have an integrated transport network. We can go and use these transport corridors for all sorts of things, walking, cycling, and we need to make choices, but choices made in one spot have an impact on the next road and the next road. when I put it up, officers, I said to officers, I need to know these traffic impacts, and officers stood and told me, you don't need to do a notice of motion, we'll have that information to you by August. And I put it in, and it was going to be reported back by the end of September. And then it was postponed because the information wasn't available. It's now 6 months since the notice of motion, and we still don't have the notice of motion information. We have a transport plan, and I do support a transport plan. A transport plan which is talking about combining walking, cycling, bus priority. This is a picture of the transport plan, the map. The interesting thing about the transport plan for Wellington City, for the CBD, is there are no roads on it. No, it's just cycling and buses. State Highway 1's there, but this is the problem. This is a plan that really reveals the direction of the city, which is that cars are not wanted. Councillor Pennant, you're right. This is a plan to slash emissions. We won't have cars in Wellington City, but they're not necessarily going to switch to cycling in from Lower Hutt or Johnsonville. They're just not going to come, and that's already happening. The cycleways are going to happen. The budget for them is already, the City Council's contribution to budget's gone up, as we know from the long-term plan. But what is not in the plan is the information we needed and asked for, and 6 months later do not have, which is the impact of the Golden Mile and all these other projects. And all these other projects. And so for this reason, I think, I urge you not to vote for any of this stuff because it doesn't deliver on the notice of motion, and that was the task we asked officers. Thank you.
Councillor Free.
Well, yeah, my problem is maybe I'm a little bit more into the detail than like big picture plans than like this. But from my point of view, what I wanted was to get a real grip on how the cycleway network was going to connect up through the city. What I can see from the Golden Mile is we've got a piece of cycleway on Lambton Quay and we've got a piece on Courtenay Place going down Dixon Street, and I still, to this day, don't really understand how they're going to connect. I have been asking, and I feel like we haven't got a really detailed understanding of how we're going to spend much more limited funds. I've heard some outline of how we're going to spend it, but at this point I'd really like to know what we're spending on fixing up cycleways, what we're spending on new ones, and how we're actually going to create the bare bones of what we can in the next few years. So I'm a little bit disappointed and underwhelmed with this plan. It didn't. I think what's been most useful has actually been the session that we've had, which has gone on for quite a long time, but I think that's illustrative of the gaps that we have. We need a plan that actually outlines how we're going to work with Greater Wellington. In the lack of Let's Get Wellington Moving, how do we actually have a firm partnership where we understand how they're going to come and we're going to go to them to talk about how we're going to make our transport plan actually work. They provide the service, we provide the roads, we need to provide bus stops, we need to understand what streets they want to use, what routes they're going to have. Even talking about the second spine, it's not clear to me which services would run on that. And there's just a whole lot that I was looking for much, much more detail about. So I'm pleased, in fact, that we're not going to spend more money on this. It's too high level for where we're at. We really need to drill down into the detail and understand how we're going to make some progress in the next few years. One thing we have got, which is really worthwhile, is our parking policy. And that is an example of policy that has informed how we practically roll out changes to our streets. And I guess that's the kind of thing I'm looking for, something that really guides us at a practical level. So we understand the purposes of the streets, the main corridors that serve various different routes, what we can expect in terms of bus supply and requirements from their point of view, what we can expect from our point of view, so we're confident taking out car parking and making changes. And of course then there's State Highway 1 and a whole other relationship with the NZTA. But I do feel that this wasn't quite it, so I'm happy with the amendments and I'll be supporting the amendments.
Councillor Abdurrahman.
Just quick and short one. And for me, I cannot believe we do not have integrated transport plan, and we are planning not to have one again. I think that is a wishy-washy, naive political shenanigans that I will not be. I can't support. So I'm not supporting this amendment, but it's also I'm hopeful the next council can make a decision, since it's all saying is just a decision to be made by the next LTP. Officers, I also found it a bit puzzled by officers' response to the amendment, because the amendment says agree not to progress with full plan, and when the advice from officers was just to adopt some form of plan, and it seems they support both. If I got that wrong, I'm happy someone to respond in their right of reply. And I don't know how this can be connected. Just, yeah, thank you.
I'll put myself on the list. So I think if, just in relation to the previous speaker, if we had actually listened to the officers that were speaking before, alongside this proposed transport plan that was requested by someone else, there's actually, what was the term that Sean used? That I don't know if it was architecture or whatever, but I think that why we're voting against the plan is because there are too many plans. We have a lot of transport planning happening. We have a lot of planning that often holds up progress, and many of us are quite tired of it. So I don't accept the criticism that has been said before then. In fact, it's just an excuse to have another go at council officers, which I think that is poor politics. Councillor Matthews, would you like to speak?
Yeah, I guess to echo your comments, Mayor Whanau, I believe we need less planning, we need a focus on action, and particularly so in the constrained funding environment that we're in. And I go back to Councillor Randall's comments. The reason our proportion of funding for cycleways has gone up is because the government has stopped funding them. And we have tailored our plans through the LTP amendment process to acknowledge that. And, to both reduce our spending overall, but, we want to do some of this work because it is still important. It is climate action. Yes, we want low carbon transport options and to prioritise them with our dollars and with our use of road space. And that is the reality. It is not a conspiracy. It is called a political majority. There is not enough information in the universe to resolve some of the fundamental differences that some councillors have over transport. And I just want to emphasise that the reason that this work was delayed was because of an LTP amendment that was the appropriate place to make decisions about the overall spend. And that was advised to councillors involved in the notice of motion, and they agreed to that and were active participants in the notice of motion that led to the LTP amendment process. So everybody is doing their best here with the resources that we have to continue the work. We do have integrated transport work happening in the city, and to sort of claim that there isn't that is inaccurate, but we actually do want to focus on delivery with the limited dollars that we have. Thank you.
Look, we've seen pretty plans, we've seen lots of little boxes of stuff. It's big corporate speak. I think what most of us wanted was to be able to show a plan on a page to Wellingtonians about what was happening and where their dollars are going. Because at the end of the day, whilst there might be political people around this table, we are here representing all Wellingtonians. And the facts are changing on us. I see there's some alternative facts being presented about how this all came about, but at the end of the day, we need a simplified view to explain to Wellingtonians who are funding all of this what is actually going on, why we should invest in A before B, and still I don't believe that we have that. I see all these amendments not saying anything. Look, I agree. Why carry on with that plan when it wasn't producing anything for us? But I challenge everyone to be able to tell people what streets in the CBD are going to be a cycle lane, what streets are where the buses are going to be, what streets are going to allow cars. And remember, we are here for the people and for the businesses who pay 3.7 times the amount of rates. So if they're not here, we have no money to do anything. Forget about what the government's funding or not. And I think it's very lazy to blame because the government's pulled funding. We have chosen, this council, to put more money into cycleways when the people of Wellington are saying, we don't want you to put more money into cycleways. You've put enough in, and we're not happy with the results. Some are, I admit, but there is an awful lot that are not. So, look, it's really disappointing to see, as Councillor Randall said, to take 6 months to come up with something that we're not comfortable with and that we cannot go out and explain to Wellingtonians what is actually happening with their money, with their city.
Oh, I just committed the cardinal sin. Apologies, Darren, if you're listening online. I didn't want to end the year on this downer, it's the last one, but what a catastrophic waste of time today has felt like to me. Just a catastrophic waste of time for staff, consultants, councillors. I just don't know if anyone in this room has been particularly richer for this experience. We need an integrated transport plan. That just seems inherently obvious. Maybe it wasn't this one, I don't know. Plan to do a plan, you adopt a plan, another plan invariably gets neglected because we are a huge, gigantic organisation. But I just feel so incredibly apathetic. And I suppose my bigger issue is that, I've called out what I call, last minute amendments, and this feels like a really substantive rewrite of a paper at the most absolute last minute possible direction there is. So, if this was Councillor Panic bringing a amendment of similar likes with 12 references to climate change, I would probably be on her for the lateness of that and for my inability to comprehend around it. So I just go into this with an absolute feeling of apathy at the moment, and I'm sorry to do that because I am, contrary to my discussions around this table, generally more happy than negative. I just wish that was coming through today. And I'll just ask we take 5 separately, please.
We still have one big meeting next week, so let's just get a good rest before that one and lunch. Councillor Rogers. That we're paying for ourselves, sorry.
Yeah, just I guess a couple of points to respond to. I do not believe it is alternative facts to go back to what we actually decided on when we did vote for the notice of motion. Councillor Calvert, if you are looking for that, it is quite early on in the paper, but it is described in full detail.
No, I wasn't.
Fair enough. If you did want to see what streets are buses, cars and cycleways, I would suggest we look at the plans that we already have for where we're putting cars, where we're putting buses and where we're putting cycleways. Or if you have particular interests in the city centre, I am always more than happy as a ward councillor to help you locate where those might be going. And in fact, I spend much of my time talking to community members about what the future of their streets look like. And many of them are excited for change. They want to see a city that has the full benefit of increased use of pedestrianisation and increased cycle use. And we don't need another plan on top of all of those plans to see it. Many of our communities see it, they vision it, they submit on it, they have their voice heard on it. It is time for us to do it. I do not think that this is a rewrite of the paper either. When we go through it clause by clause, the first clause is doing the opposite of what the paper recommended and was discussed as one of the options in the paper. Clause 3 then talks about some of the consequences of that, which would be around the concerns members had, and then also when we're talking about things like bringing back congestion charging, that was because it was wrapped up in the transport plan. I understand we've got a significant volume of work, but we were elected to carry out that work, and so I think it's important that we continue to do that diligently and with our eyes and minds open. But I'll be supporting the amended substantive because I already see the full vision that we have. I already believe we're a creature of statute. We have many plans that we are legislated to do, and we do not need another plan, we need action.
I think all the views have been well versed and we just need to move on. So, write a reply.
Thanks everyone for the healthy debate. I know we're all tired, and I do want to apologise for the lateness of the of these amendments. And just granted, we've got 3 quite healthy meetings on this week, so I do think that we've been going one by one. So thank you, everybody. I think I do just have to acknowledge that we have reduced our cycleway budget by $120 million. And we are working to increase public transport, increase cycling and walking, reduce emissions, and actually one of the purposes of all of that is to enable those that need to drive to be able to do so by letting others that can take other modes. So I'm really confident in our plans that we've voted on to prioritise harbour quays, public transport, inner city, cycleway connections, Golden Mile walking and cycling, and congestion charging. Let's do it, team! Kia ora, that's the information.
Wonderful. We're going to move to a vote. Now, what number did you want? 5 separately, and is the rest together? Excellent. So we're going to vote for everyone, every thing except 5.
Sorry, could we take one separately too, please? One separately?
Okay. You know what? Let's just go 1. Receive the information. Let's vote for 1. Councillor Brown. Otherwise, we might, because I think he's in a board meeting. Yeah, let's go ahead. And that has passed. We're now going to vote for every 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. That is carried. Now 5. And that is carried. Okay, thank you very much. 5-minute loo break, and then we're going to come back and smash everything in under 30 minutes or less. The report as read. Are we at a quorum? Yes. Do we have any questions? No. Oh, excellent. I will move the motion. Deputy Mayor will second. Is there any debate? Oh, no, she's not even here. Sorry. Councillor Matthews will second. Is there any debate? There isn't. Let's go to a vote. Sarah. That is passed. Wonderful. 3.1, report of Regs Committee. Take the report as read. Do we have any questions? No, we don't. Councillor Free, would you like to move?
I'll move it, and just to say that the Island Bay and Berempore Community Orchard is brilliant. The trees have grown really well. We are just being asked to approve this because it is on town belt land. 5 years plus 5 years right of renewal, although to be honest, I can't imagine that you wouldn't keep on renewing it. But anyway, that's what we're being asked to approve. Very happy to recommend it, and I believe Councillor McNulty will second.
Right, any debate? Nope, let's go to a vote. And that is passed. 3.2, Long-Term Plan Finance and Performance Committee. I'll take the report as read. Any questions? Councillor Panovich will move. Would you like to speak?
Yes, it's just relatively straightforward and slight movements in the capital plan.
Cool. Councillor Matthews will second and reserve a right. Any debate? Councillor Calvert.
Yeah, look, agree, it has to come to council to approve, and that's fine, but just like the Regulatory Processes Committee, their recommendation came straight to council. I think inserting an extra step going to the Long-Term Plan Committee is unproductive, and we should send those things straight to here. Now, I appreciate that those changes will be done, perhaps at the next triennium, but I just want to point out inserting an extra step that's not needed. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you, Councillor.
I think you're referring to the wrong report. This has come straight from the LTP committee.
You can count my speech for the next one then.
Efficient.
Yeah, I want to be efficient, so at least you've heard from me once.
Excellent. Right, a reply? Nope, we'll go to a vote. And it's passed. So the next LTP report, I'll take as read. Any questions before we move on to debate? Nope. Councillor Matthews, would you like to speak?
Very briefly, yes. Your comments noted, Councillor Calvert. Unqualified audit opinion. We've had verbal clearance. We're the first in New Zealand that Audit New Zealand has provided an assurance report for. So verified greenhouse gas and emission reduction plan achievement means we now qualify for climate action loans from LGFA, and now we will be able to integrate these back into the whole of council annual report process in the future. Probably still with a convoluted bureaucratic process, but that's how we roll.
Thank you. Councillor Panovich, would you like to speak now?
No.
Councillor Pennant?
Thank you. Just really briefly, I just want to publicly say again, thank you to the staff for the work that they've done, because we are on track organisationally. I've been critical citywide, but we are doing good guns on this one, and long may that continue.
Great. I'm not seeing any other speakers. Wonderful. Let's go to a vote. And that is passed. We are now going to move to public excluded. I will move the motion. Deputy Mayor will second. Any debate? No. Oh, yes, Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. Look, I just like to be consistent because generally I like these things to be in public, and you know, I'm asking questions around, you know, just policy-wise and all the rest of it. But I think this time I will vote for PX, but just obviously with the expectation that it will be released ASAP. Kia ora.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any further debate, so let's go to a vote. Do we have to vote again? Oh, there we go. No, it wasn't on the screen, so there you go. And that is passed. Thank you. We'll just give it a minute to go into Unuhia ki te uru tapu kia wā, tia kia māma, tēnā kau, te tinana, te wairoa, I te ara taka. Koia rā e rongo, kia wā, tia, ai rā.